Hello everyone. Today I would like to discuss various trends that cause a renewed debate on business ethics. I describe such trends in chapter 5 of the book Ethics and Business, A Global Introduction, and they are privatization, globalization, technological development, economic/financial crisis, and all these, they cause a change in moral perception. In a way, these trends cause a moral vacuum, as I like to call it. This means that as a result of the changes in society, morality somehow is at stake. There are differences we didn't expect to happen, or there are differences compared to previous settings. And business plays a dominant role here in potentially solving it, or at least we expect business to a certain degree to contribute to solving the dilemmas that are a result of this moral vacuum. The first is called privatization. And actually this has led to a double moral vacuum, if you like. First of all, what is privatization? Because it's quite a general word used in many contexts, so we have to be careful in using it just too lightly. In essence, it means something like a job that was performed by the government before is now performed by the private sector, and the government deliberately chose to make the private sector competent in dealing with these issues. So, for instance, when electricity supply used to be a government-driven affair, and it is now a private business-driven affair, this is an example of privatization. So let me get this straight. There is no right and wrong necessarily in privatization, but it leads to different moral questions. And the first moral question is that when something was done by a government before, do I then get the same, can I expect the same morality in the performance of this public affair when it is performed by private undertakings? So maybe to put it in a very short one-liner, which probably doesn't really do justice to the situation, but still, do I get the best medication or do I get the most profitable medication when healthcare is privatized? Now, in this one-liner, you may recognize something uneasy, where in case of a government, we expect a government to act on behalf of the public good and to also solve social problems on behalf of its citizens. When a business is taking over the role of a government, we may still have those expectations, but you could ask yourself the question if these are valid expectations, because a business is there primarily to make a profit. The idea is that a business is able to do a job in a way more efficient way and in a way more competitive way than a government. This also would mean, hypothetically, that it could lead to a cost reduction for the entire society. So that is, in essence, the good news. However, the moral question here is that we may expect business to uphold the same norms and values compared to a government, because the government is the one who previously executed this particular role. For instance, the providence of healthcare. Another issue is at the consumer side, where a government is elected by citizens. A private undertaking deals with consumers. A citizen is not necessarily a consumer, while it might be the same problem. We call this the citizen-consumer hypothesis. This kind of means that when you act in your capacity as a citizen, you may pursue different values compared to when you act in your capacity as a consumer. So this could be, for instance, that you're really worried about certain things in the world. For instance, the well-being of poor farmers somewhere on the other side of the world who produce your coffee beans. At the same time, when you enter a shop, you buy coffee beans that are the cheapest or that have the best price quality, if you like. So, you act differently in your capacity as a consumer compared to your role you play as a citizen, while you're actually the same person. This also leads to a moral vacuum, if you like, because the morality you uphold in your capacity as a citizen is different compared to the morality you uphold in your capacity as a consumer. So in both relationships, so that is from government to business and from citizen to consumer, we could ask ourselves the question, what is the particular role of the private sector in upholding a certain morality? Where we could protect a certain morality in the old situation, can we protect a similar kind of morality in the new situation? And is business then responsible for protecting that kind of morality? Well, this is the question that triggers a new debate on business ethics when it concerns privatization. So a second phenomenon here is globalization, the famous G word. But once again, also globalization is kind of a difficult concept with a lot of meanings. You can apply this word in different contexts. Well, in my book, I primarily focus on the economic context. So we define globalization as a result of fading borders, meaning we lower trade barriers as much as possible so that we enable business, the business world, to do business across the globe without too much hindering of physical borders between countries. Now, this leads to a very vivid international business, which is a good thing in its own right. And the expectation is that it can lead to way bigger market opportunities for competitive organizations, enterprises, compared to a situation in which you live in a non-globalized world. But at the same time, it also leads to questions relating morality. Because due to globalization, it could be really effective to, as a country, to lower your own national standards in order to attract as much business as possible. This is a phenomenon we call regulatory competition. In other words, countries compete with favorable rules and regulations for business. So it could be beneficial for countries to lower their standards in the context of the environment, for instance, environmental standards, or to lower their labor standards. All that in order to attract most business, because when you do not protect your laborers at the same level as your neighbor, then for a multinational it might be more beneficial to conduct business in your country, because there they do not have to bother all kinds of rules and regulations compared to the other country. And also here we ask ourselves the question, what do we expect from the private sector in terms of morality? Do we expect them to solve these matters? Do we expect them to uphold their own standards in terms of labor regulations or environmental regulations, the so-called private standards, if you like? It could be a way to solve this, because private standards, they apply to an entire product chain, where national standards applied by a national legislator, their effect holds at the physical border of a country. But do we really want business to do these things? Do they have this kind of responsibility? This is the main issue that comes with globalization in terms of business ethics. And again, it triggers a new debate on business ethics in a global context. A third issue is technological development. Where when technology is progressing rapidly, especially when it's in the hands of big tech companies, it could make our lives easier, because we have new products that can help us in our daily business or daily affairs. We have perhaps access to more data compared to before. But at the same time, it also leads to questions of morality. First of all, the knowledge and the skills in technological developments is in the hands of very few who really understand what's going on here, where the products become way more complex. Those who buy these products, or those who have to work with these products on a day-to-day basis, they may not necessarily be aware of what they're dealing with. Where in most economic models we assume that to a certain degree perhaps consumers may use their buying power to correct really unethical behavior, it also implies that those consumers actually know what they're buying. But when they do not know exactly what they're buying anymore, they probably will also not really use that buying power to correct potential unethical behavior. So also in this context, do we then assume that with power comes responsibility? So when there is a certain exclusive knowledge within a certain organization, a private organization, do we then also expect them to take a certain responsibility towards society in upholding moral standards? Because we cannot expect necessarily the consumer to correct these potential unethical things from happening anymore, because they just simply don't know how it works and what they can do about it. A fourth element is economic/financial crisis. This has led multiple times to a certain reassessment of our global financial institutions and how our global economy functions. So especially in the credit crunches in 2008 and moving on, we've seen a debate, a very intense debate on the moral role of the banking sector, the financial sector, and how they should take a certain responsibility towards society in conducting their business. Now, all these factors, privatization, globalization, technological progress, and economic/financial crisis, lead to a shift in morality, if you like. And as a result, there is a certain moral vacuum, and we cannot just automatically uphold similar moral standards we used to uphold in an old situation compared to the new situation. The main question now is, what role do we expect the private sector to perform here in terms of upholding morality towards society? This is, in other words, business ethics in a contemporary setting. And it is food for thought, because I do not necessarily have the answers to that question. But it's quite important to reflect on what trends that are now debatable, if you like, stir this renewed debate on business ethics, and what is your exact position in this debate? What do you think about it? Especially when you become a professional in a private undertaking. Well, thank you very much for listening and watching, and I hope this contributes to a better understanding of the major parts of Chapter 5 of Ethics and Business, a Global Introduction. Thank you.